This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. I have here 3 Cleveland Browns who I think have a chance to redeem themselves this upcoming season. Maybe they can redeem themselves because they've had a slow start to their career and people are starting to lose belief in those players. Maybe they're having a slow start because, well, not slow start. Maybe they're having to redeem themselves because they had a legitimately bad season last year, or maybe they have to redeem themselves because they're at risk of being lost in the shuffle, and this season provides maybe a slight opportunity, or that player's talent provides a slight opportunity for that player to shine through this year when it's a little bit unexpected. We'll start with the first player on this list, Mike Hall. Now, no player that's been drafted over the last 3 years on the Cleveland Browns, other than, ironically enough, the other Ohio State player that the Cleveland Browns have, has had more of a stilted start to their career. Mike Hall and Quincy Judkins, we'll see if this becomes a thing after next season, because I think they've had identical things where both missed the start of the season because of some kind of pending domestic violence situation. And then in the end of the season, they got hurt, which meant that they spent most of the offseason rehabbing. Although it seems like Quincy is on a much faster track to return than Mike Hall was, who did not come back till halfway through last season. But back to Mike Hall, right? Mike Hall, since he's been a Cleveland Brown, since he got drafted in 2024, he's entering his 3rd year. This will be his first actual offseason where he hopefully, obviously you want him to stay out of trouble and injury-free, will have a full offseason to actually prepare for the year. His rookie year got derailed. What was a good camp got derailed because he got in a major domestic violence situation. He did not end up getting suspended for that specific scenario, but he did get put on the commissioner's exempt list, I believe. Correct me if I am wrong there. I'm not 100% about that. But he had that whole situation play out. It cost him the bulk of his training camp and the start of his rookie year. Then he played, and he actually played at a really high level when he was out there. His rookie year on true pass sets, he had a 17.6 pass rush win rate, which is a really good number, right, for a rookie, especially for somebody who was 20 years old at the time, which keep that one in your back pocket that he was 20 in his rookie year. We're going to come back to that one for sure. But his rookie year had a 17.6 pass rush win rate, despite not having a full training camp. But then he hurts his knee, right? He hurts his knee, and for whatever reason, the rehab for that injury lingers much longer than people anticipated. I talked about this frequently during the season last year, where Mike Hall's knee injury went from Andrew Berry saying at the end of the year that they expect Mike Hall back for training camp. And then training camp comes along, and, you know, Mike Hall is on the exercise bikes, and they're like, oh, yeah, we expect him back for the season. So much so that the Browns didn't even put him on an injury list to start the year. They rostered Mike Hall for like the first 4 weeks of the season. Well, for the whole season, actually. They rostered him instead of putting him on an injury or some kind of exempt list. And even though he was rostered, which means that they were expecting him to come back. You were hearing at first, he should be back week 2, you know, maybe not week 1, but week 2. There's a chance for week 1. And then week 3 goes along and he's not out there. Week 4 goes along, he's not out there. Week 5 goes along, he's not out there. Week 6, 7, 8. And you're like, when is Mike Hall going to get out there? He finally gets out there in the second half of the season. And he did not look as good as he did in his rookie year, right? His win rate numbers plummeted. I think it went down to like 12% when he was at 17 his rookie year. On top of that, he kind of got lost in the shuffle. Malik Collins was in the middle of a career renaissance with the Cleveland Browns last year, especially at the slot that you have for Mike Hall, which is a pass rushing defensive tackle. Malik Collins was having a tremendous year, the best year of his life in football, which led to less emphasis being put on Mike Hall because he was simply less needed. But it did kind of show the difference of like, hey, we gave these snaps to Malik Collins. He's dominating with these snaps. And then we see Mike Hall out there and the domination is not there, which led to his 2025 being a footnote, a disappointment for sure. But here's the thing that I think we ought to not forget about Mike Hall. Mike Hall is 22, not 2022. He's not 2022 years old. He is 22 years old as of recording this video. He will turn 23 in June, which makes him the same age effectively as Mason Graham. If we're just using the age that he is right now, 22 years old, Mike Hall is the same age or younger than 8 of your 10 2026 draft picks, right? The 10 rookies we bought in via the draft. Mike Hall is younger than 8 of those guys, right? Which really puts into perspective what his timeline is as a player. Yes, he's a third-year player, and you would be making the assumption that a third-year player back against the wall, you got to produce now. But if Mike Hall were drafted in this draft class, he would be a rookie, and he would be one of the younger rookies on the roster. So the age is still there. There's still a lot of room for improvement and a lot of room we should leave for Mike Hall for growth. Now, his level of impact last year is concerning. The fact that that knee injury continued on is a bit concerning and not the most encouraging thing because it seems like it was something to do with his rehab, which at times can be a red flag, right? If a player's struggling with rehab, maybe they're not hitting their goals or they're working hard enough behind the scenes, or maybe there was a legitimate complication that required medical intervention that was outside the control of Mike Hall. But either way, you're a little bit concerned about that, right? How's he going to come back? Is his knee going to be fine? But I do look forward to Mike Hall getting a full offseason. Hopefully he's 100% healthy. He's feeling great. And being able to use that full offseason to build some momentum into the year and then seeing what Mike Hall becomes after having that for the first time in his career, which is necessary. Also, it's his third year in the NFL, third year in the NFL weight program, and his body is developing. Sometimes you just can't get but so strong until you reach a certain age or a certain point in your genetics. So hopefully, hoping that Mike Hall has got to the point where he can keep up with some of that grown man NFL strength for somebody who's been playing in this league since before he could drink. But Mike Hall, definitely one of those players. We're going to talk about our next player in just a second, but I got to thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a fun way to earn cash while you watch your favorite teams. No complex betting rules. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. Here are my picks for this upcoming season, AFC North edition. Jimmy Bernard, I have less than 475. This has to do with volume available in Pittsburgh's offense. Quincy Judkins, I have over 975. Browns improved line. I think the run game is going to be better with it. Chase Brown, under 900 yards. Joe Burrow equals less rushing yards usually for the Bengals offense. Mark Andrews, more than 475 yards. Lamar's going to need a safety blanket. Check to see if PrizePicks is available in your state. You could follow me on the app at Quinn_C to see all my lineups. Download the PrizePicks app today. Play $5 and get $50 in lineup to download the app using the link in the description. The next player I have here is Cedric Tillman. Now, I shared this stat about Cedric Tillman. Now, it comes with obvious context, and I need to be very clear here about what my intent is in bringing up this statistical comparison for Cedric Tillman is. And it's not to say that Cedric Tillman is going to be the player that I'm comparing him to, but it is to make a point that Cedric Tillman's production might be a little bit better than you think. So Cedric Tillman, throughout the first 126 targets of his career, has had 833 yards and 5 touchdowns. Jackson Smith-Njigba, who again he's not going to be Jackson Smith-Njigba. Let's be very clear on that. But Jackson Smith-Njigba's production throughout his first 126 targets, about 854 yards and 4 touchdowns. So identical production at the early part of both of these players' career. I think there is an obvious difference here, right? Age is different with Cedric Tillman and Jackson Smith-Njigba, and the length of time it took for these players to hit 126 targets specifically is much different, right? 38 games for Cedric Tillman versus 22 for Jackson Smith-Njigba. So again, these players are clearly on two different paths. The point is that there has been signs that Tillman can be a NFL level wide receiver on some level, right? The production hasn't been nothing from Cedric Tillman. There's been something there. When he gets targeted, there's a reasonable amount of production there from him. The problem is he's not consistent with anything when it comes to his game. His level of play has not been consistent. His availability has not been consistent. His mastery of the playbook has not been consistent, right? The point isn't to say that Cedric Tillman on any level is the same player as Jackson Smith-Njigba. They're completely different tiers of player. But we know that Jackson Smith-Njigba was a good receiver early in his career and a productive receiver early in his career. And we know what 126 targets and that production on 126 targets feels like if you get it consecutively. But when you get it in chunks and bits and pieces over 3 years, it doesn't feel like it's useful production, but it is still useful production. It's the same production. It's just spread over 3 years. And again, I'm not going to compare Cedric Tillman to somebody like JSN, but I do think Cedric Tillman can be a useful third or fourth receiver in the NFL. And when we're talking about the current context of Cedric Tillman, which is somebody who might get cut this year, I think that production comp is relevant because not a lot of people who are being talked about as fifth wide receivers or potentially a cut candidate can say that about their first 126 targets in the NFL that is comparable to anybody on the level of a Jackson Smith-Njigba. There is some talent there with Cedric Tillman that I think is obvious. The problem is that there is no consistency there with Cedric Tillman. You can't depend on him. The good thing for Cedric, but it's also the bad thing for Cedric, is that they're no longer in a situation where they're going to be dependent on his consistency, which might allow his production to shine through a bit more, because there are things that Cedric Tillman does do well on the football field, and the Browns would be wise to utilize it. The problem with Cedric Tillman over the last 3 years is that the Browns have been in a position to lean on Cedric Tillman as a number 2 wide receiver when he's just not been capable of doing that. Now, with the current pecking order at the Cleveland Browns, where you have Jerry Jeudy, Harold Fannin, Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston, all kind of taking up those ranks for who's going to be the most consistent, who's going to be the most dependable for this team. Now you can allow for Cedric Tillman to kind of be in that same box that Isaiah Bond could be in, where you could just worry about him doing what he does well and getting you a big play every now and then. He probably caps out as a wide receiver who probably, gets about 300 to 500 yards of production a year. But if your fourth or fifth wide receiver is getting you almost 500 yards of production, then you're at a really good place as a wide receiver room. And I think that's where Cedric Tillman can be. So maybe his redemption doesn't look as gaudy as we think, but I do think that Cedric Tillman can be an effective and useful player for this wide receiver room. Number 1 receiver? No. Number 2 receiver? No. Number 3 option? Probably not. But 4th, 5th, 6th option? I think there's a future there. And I think he's more than somebody who should just get cut because fans have been disappointed in his output so far. The third player I think can possibly redeem themselves this year, I think it's the most obvious one, which is Jerry Jeudy, because he just did not play well last year. For whatever reason, I'll lay out what I believe the reasons to be. Jerry Jeudy was not very productive for the Cleveland Browns. One of those reasons I think had to do with the amount of pressure that the lack of talent on the Browns offense forced Jerry Jeudy into. When the Browns only have one wide receiver and really one player on offense at the beginning of the season that NFL teams know as a threat, that means that Jerry Jeudy is becoming the main fixture of a team's defensive game plan. And Jerry Jeudy can be a productive wide receiver for you. Jerry Jeudy is not the kind of player that can withstand being the main fixture of a defensive game plan. There's a better word in there that I can't think of right now, but we'll just use fixture for now. And that really hurt Jerry Jeudy. There was no way to hide Jerry Jeudy last year and get him on corners that were better matchups for him. When the Browns had to play the Patriots, it was Christian Gonzalez all day. And if you have to go straight up with Jerry Jeudy versus Christian Gonzalez, we know who's going to win that battle. That, I think, was the reason for a lot of that down year that we saw from Jerry Jeudy. Obviously, the drops started to pile up. His frustration started to pile up. The pressure that he's putting on himself as a true number one started to pile up. And all of those things led to bad results here. On top of the fact that for most of the season, the Browns, who had a game plan for Jerry Jeudy last year, had to change that game plan because, again, there was a lack of talent there at wide receiver. They had to use him differently than they did last year, which I think also led to a lot of the awkwardness that we saw with what Jerry Jeudy was being asked to do. This year, he's going to be in a situation where it's much easier for him to succeed because he's not asked to be the only pass threat on the offense. The Browns went out and drafted 2 wide receivers, an extra tight end. They have extra passing threats. They have different ways that they can align Jerry Jeudy. They have actual ways to get Jerry Jeudy to matchups that they find to be more favorable for Jerry Jeudy in an offense that's going to get him in space in doing what Jerry Jeudy likes to do the best, instead of asking him to be a 50-50 downfield guy when he's not that, right? You have guys to do those things, so what you can ask Jerry Jeudy to do is much more focused. I think he will have an uptick in production versus last year, but I think his efficiency should be much better just because he's in a better spot to be successful. So Jerry Jeudy would be the last guy I would throw into that category of Browns who could redeem themselves. But are there Browns that you think could redeem themselves? Let me know in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.